Today, I'm delighted to have Mary Kidson back again. Mary is an experienced professional gardener with a business called My Garden Academy, where she runs courses for beginners. The last time she was here, she spoke about gardening and mental health, which you can go back and listen to. But today, we're going to be talking about her other job. And she's an educational therapist running a company which provides online programs to help children and adults, helping them with their particularly processing auditory information and literacy skills. So welcome to the show, Mary. Welcome back again.
Thank you. Thank you. It's great to be back again.
Yeah, it's nice to have you. So can you tell us a bit about your other job, so to speak, as an educational therapist?
Yes. Well, this is something I've been doing since 2008, so it's quite well established as a business. And I got into it through my own children, particularly with my daughter, who struggled with her processing, particularly her processing speed. And this had a huge knock-on effect onto her ability to communicate. Not only with adults, but particularly to communicate with her peers at school. So it was very, very difficult for her to hold a conversation on the playground because she couldn't process sounds that were coming out to her from her, she couldn't process the words or the conversation. Right. So she ended up, not having friends on the playground very well. I mean, she was very, very well liked, but it caused a huge problem for her. And then it also had a knock-on effect to her actual language development. And we only found out about this probably when she was about 7. And, she'd had severe speech and language difficulties, for her whole life. It was only around about this age that we found out about auditory processing, which was a very new area. And it's quite a contentious area even today here in the UK. There is a very specific medical condition called auditory processing disorder, but it isn't very well recognised. We don't test for it very well here in the UK, but it is very big in the US, for example. So it's back in 2006 when I first started looking into this for my daughter. It was very new, and the therapies that were coming out were also very new as well. But for my own daughter, it was absolutely life-changing. Just being able to increase her speed of processing and also to improve the accuracy of what she was hearing. I mean, any child who's had a ear infection, and most children do have ear infections, in their early years. And when they have an ear infection, they're basically living in a bubble, almost as if they're underwater. And in those early years, it's a really critical time for children to be hearing sounds appropriately and correctly. And of course, if you think about if you're in this bubble where you're underwater, basically, you're not hearing sounds properly. So your brain doesn't take those sounds in properly. And that then has a knock-on effect to spelling, language development generally. It can have a huge effect on how you perceive, answer questions, your comprehension, and being able to read as well. If you can't hear sounds correctly and then break a word down appropriately, then you're at a severe disadvantage. And it really, really is a huge, huge issue for a lot of children.
Yeah. And
then one other aspect of this auditory processing is hearing in background noise. And a lot of children who've got auditory processing difficulties or even auditory processing disorder do have difficulty in hearing in background noise. And this can be something that's quite difficult for teachers to understand. When you think of a primary school classroom, there might be 30 children or more in there. There's a lot of noise. And a child who can't screen out background noise, can't hear what the teacher's saying, or misunderstand what's being said, and they'll often get into trouble. And I've had direct experience of with my daughter, where she wasn't able to fully hear what the teacher was telling her, so she ended up doing something that she wasn't supposed to do and getting told off for it, which she was very, very, very upset about.
Yeah.
Again, and this happens regularly. And on the playground, because she couldn't, well, not just on the playground, but even in classrooms generally, or just generally in the school, the only way she could actually process it, or not necessarily process, but understand what was going on, was by copying, looking around her and seeing what everybody else was doing, because she couldn't take in the conversation. So, of course, that meant that she might be copying behaviour that wasn't appropriate. Or she might get involved in a conversation where she thought she was being praised for something, but actually she was being told off. So all of these things had a huge knock-on effect on her mental health. Massive effect on her mental health. And she would often just come home from school and scream, because she'd had such a bad time at school.
It's awful.
It is, it's absolutely awful. And it was very difficult to get teachers to understand what was going on. And luckily now we do have a bit of a greater awareness, but I hear it so many times where children are really, really struggling at school for the very reason that they can't process auditory information appropriately. They might be very slow compared to their peers. They might not be able to hear in background noise. They can't hear the sounds in words. They might not be able to pronounce those words properly. They certainly can't spell them properly because they don't know what the sounds are. They might even pick up something that's actually completely different. That's another big thing. Where I'll ask parents, they'll say, well, if you're talking to your child, will they often repeat back a word that's completely different to what you're expecting? And they do. And another aspect of it is auditory memory, which is often poor. And auditory memory has a big effect on spelling. You need a good auditory memory to be able to break words down into their individual syllables and phonemes.
Yeah.
Particularly if, more than 3 syllables in that word. And I'll often ask parents, if you ask your child, say, to go upstairs and bring down your socks and your shoes, I'll ask them, can they do that? And quite often they can't. They might just bring down the shoes because they haven't been able to remember the whole of the instruction. And you've only got to think about what effect that will have on that child in school.
Yeah.
Where the teachers are giving out very, very sort of detailed instructions. All they've remembered is the last bit.
Yeah.
Or maybe the first bit. And the bit in the middle, can't take in.
Yeah.
And so many of these children, they just, they end up being disciplined for something that's not their fault, for a complete misunderstanding of how they're dealing with things. And it's, I find it very, very frustrating that even now in this day and age, we're still struggling to get this recognised in schools.
Yeah. And you said it's more recognised in America, right?
Yeah, very much more recognised in America. The auditory processing disorder is very, very clear cut out there that exists. Here in the UK, we're still on the sort of cusp of, does it exist or doesn't it? We still don't have real, full, recognised identification procedures. I think there's only 1 or 2 places in the UK that are actually able to run a full set of diagnostic tests. It can only be done and diagnosed by an audiologist. And there is a lot of discussion about whether it exists or not.
So why is there this discussion? Why is it that in this country there's debate around whether it exists or not, whereas in the United States, they know it exists. What is...
Oh, good question, and I can't really answer that. And I think it's to do with research and whether they can actually identify it, and whether there's any difference, whether it's to do with the ears or whether it's to do with the brains. I think it's because it's not clear cut from the UK's point of view. That's where we're at.
In the United States, have you actually looked at their research, or what information have you got from there?
All I know is that it exists. I mean, I know that, with my own children, it exists. I know that there was an auditory processing difficulty. At least my daughter does have a diagnosis of auditory processing disorder.
Right, yeah.
Came from the UK, but I'm very, very aware of the huge difficulty that parents have in getting their children diagnosed and even getting them assessed. It's very, very, very difficult because we have so few centres here in the UK that can run the full set of tests and diagnose appropriately. I mean, it's, as I say, it has to be diagnosed by an audiologist.
And in the States, have they got therapies and things? Have they got a lot of therapies that they use with these children?
Yes, and there is here in the UK. There's an awful lot of therapies that are available to help. There is, of course, no cure whatsoever, but I know that we can improve the lives of some, most children who do have an auditory processing difficulty of some sort. And this is what I specialise in my business, is providing some of the therapies anyway, that I have seen that have improved lives. I saw it in my own children, and since I've been in business, I've seen it in many, many, many other children and adults as well. It can be more difficult in adults because by the time you get to being an adult, you've set up a lot of compensatory processes already.
Yeah.
Quite often these programs will try and unpick those. But it can be difficult. And not everybody wants to do that, which is fair enough.
Yeah.
But those who persevere, they do find a huge improvement.
Yeah. So what sort of things do you do with these people?
Yes, well, the first thing I look at is how accurately they're hearing sounds. And if it's very clear that there's an issue there with the accuracy of their sound, or if they are struggling with background noise, particularly if they're on the younger age, sort of under 7 years old, then the first step is always to put in something called the listening program. Yeah. Which is very easy. It's just a question of listening to modified classical music through headphones twice a day for 15 minutes at a time, at the correct frequency, at the correct level. It also helps with a lot of things. It can help with the vestibular system. Well, this is something we don't consider, that sound affects, but it affects the sensory system. It affects how our balance. But we know that there are balancing organs within the ears. Yeah. And the listening program helps balance all this out. And it can have absolutely tremendous improvements. So that's the first program I put in place. Yeah. I then have something called Fast Forward, which is a much more comprehensive program, and that looks at not just processing speed, improving processing speed. It improves the way in which people can process individual phonemes at speed. And we also work on language conventions, comprehension, and reading skills. So it's a very comprehensive program. And children need to be 7 years old, 6 or 7, 6 at the youngest, before they can start that program.
Right. And what kind of results do you get?
Well, it can be absolutely amazing. Yeah. I think one of the most important effects that I get back from some parents, and which really, really is so important, is they'll come to me and they'll say to me, my daughter or my son now has friends on the playground.
Yeah.
You know, and that is life-changing for that child. Totally life-changing. And just think, you know, previously, the effect that it's having on their mental health, the effect that it's having on their work, you know, how upset they must be about going to school every day. And now they're able to make friends, keep those friends. And I just think it's just amazing.
That is
so rewarding to hear that back from parents.
Yeah.
And I hear it so many times. And then I get, you know, their reading age has improved. They're reading much more age-appropriate texts, and they're doing absolutely fine at school now. Everything's improved. It can be a very subtle improvement. It can not necessarily be, oh, yeah, right now I've got a 2-year improvement in my reading skills. It's more a question of things are just so much easier. And, you know, and now the child can actually get benefit from the good teaching that's being put in place at school and just move forward. With my own son, he was struggling, and I put in the listening program. Didn't tell the school what I was doing. I put in the listening program, and then another program I was working on was on his movement skills, because he had a bit of trouble with his coordination. So I did these two. I started them at the beginning of the Easter holidays. And then when I got his report in the end of the summer, it said that he'd made huge improvement in all areas, and particularly since Easter. So I thought that said it all.
Yeah. Yeah.
That was enough for me.
Yeah.
And with my own daughter, because she had these severe speech and language difficulties, she had regular assessments from the speech therapist, and she went up. She was on the first centile on one test, which is, you know, low. It means that every other child in a room would perform better than she would.
Right.
But she moved up 23 centile points on the scale, which put her in the normal range, which was absolutely incredible.
Yeah. Yeah, that is. How did you develop these therapies?
Well, I haven't developed them. They are produced by scientists in the United States.
Right.
And I've had to train in being able to provide them. And, you know, once I trained, then that was fine. I could actually be a provider for all these programs.
Okay, and how long have you been doing this?
Since 2008.
Okay.
So quite a long time now.
Yeah, yeah. So you're quite experienced in it.
Yes, that's right, yes. And things have changed over that time, like the listening program, you know, that's now online. It didn't used to be online. We used to have to buy CDs, and so things have improved.
Yeah.
With technology, and Fast Forward has changed as well over the time. It's modernised and changed the way it works a little bit. So the results are a little bit faster now.
Yeah.
But, generally, the underlying science behind both of them hasn't changed at all.
Yeah, and I was reading through your website about this, and you've got something called the movement program. What does that involve?
Yeah, so that's a set of exercises that's streamed to people through the computer each day for 12 weeks, 5 days a week. And that works on, there's something called primitive reflexes, which we're all born with. And these primitive reflexes, as you move through growth through the neonatal period and up to, 2 or 3 years old, a lot of these reflexes should be switched off. And what we find quite often with children who've got a coordination difficulty, or they might have autism, they might have speech and language difficulties, might have general, issues going on, we often find that these reflexes haven't been switched off. And so the movement program works on some of them because they have a huge effect on literacy. Right. Huge effect. And so the movement program works on that. It also works on being able to follow a beat.
Mm.
Because beat competency is a really, really important skill, again, for when you're learning to spell, when you're spelling words, when you're creating sentences, and just being able to be fluent with your language. Beat competency is really, really important. And a lot of children might have trouble following a beat, banging a drum or whatever. And then also being able to cross the midline. A lot of children with coordination difficulties actually can't cross the midline. So they can't cross their arms over easily like this.
Yeah.
And they can't march properly.
Right.
And we work on that. The movement program works on that. And just a lot of, movement is incredibly important into how we operate as human beings. And
yeah,
you wouldn't necessarily think about that.
Yeah.
And how it affects your school work.
Yeah. I mean, I spoke to a dance psychologist a couple of shows ago, and
yes,
he runs a course called Movement in Practice. So he was talking about movement, and he was talking about how dancing can actually help people with problem-solving skills.
Yes,
as well as physical health, mental health, and all
that's
that.
right. That's right. Yes, it's incredible, and just like music is so important to us, and movement is another thing that is so important. But if there is a real difficulty there, say there's a real difficulty with the reflexes, then it can be a source of embarrassment for children in school if they can't do what their peers can do.
Yeah.
And and that affects their self-esteem and everything, and their confidence. So giving them this ability to transform themselves in a way, so that they can then make these movements and take part in the games and the gym and just be able to do what everybody else can do. That's life-changing as well for that child.
So I'm assuming that this would not only help them with their academic work, but it would help them with the sports, with the PE lessons.
Yes, it would.
Sports.
Yes, it would. Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, many of us, my age, I look back and, a lot of people have said, "Oh, I could never do this at school. I could never play whatever it was." And of course, we weren't as aware as we are now of actually that could be changed. And all of these programs, they work on the principle of brain plasticity.
Yeah.
So that's about the fact that the brain can change.
Yeah.
Throughout your whole life, we used to think that the brain, after a certain age, the brain can't change. That's it. Now we know differently.
Yeah.
And when you think of people who get strokes and they make a fantastic recovery. Yeah. They wouldn't be able to do that if their brain wasn't able to change. And so all these programs are based on that concept and about how the brain can create new neural connections.
Yeah.
Given time. It requires a lot of repetition.
Yeah.
And fast word contains a lot of repetition. And children, they don't realise that they might be doing 10,000 trials over the course of an exercise, but it's that then builds up these neural connections. And then once they're built up and the child is using them every day, then as long as there's no major trauma to the brain, then that should stay with them for life. So, it's amazing, really.
Yeah, it is. And fast forward, is that something that was created in America, developed?
Yes. One of the scientists who created it was a gentleman called Michael Merzenich, and he was very much involved in the creation and development of cochlear implants. So he was very big in that area. Yeah, so the research that's been done in the US has been quite spectacular, really, in this area. Yeah,
seems like it. Yeah, and I've noticed on your website that you can also help people who are learning English as a foreign language.
Yes, because what we're doing in these programs is we're building the underlying skills that we all need to process language, to read and write, and all our literacy skills. And it's all based on the English language. So if English isn't your first language, then particularly Fast Word is very, very good at helping to improve your ability to be more accurate with your English. Obviously, we're also dealing with grammar and comprehension as well, and punctuation and spelling and all the general literacy skills.
Right. So it isn't for anyone who's just learning a language. It is specifically for people learning English as a foreign language.
Yes, that's right. That's right.
So if any of us are learning another language, we can't really use anything like that to help us learn better, or we can?
Well, the listening program would always help, because you're going to be able to, hear sounds better in whatever language you're learning. So the listening program is going to help. I mean, a lot of singers use the listening program to help them be more accurate in their singing. And Fast Word is also available in Spanish.
Yeah,
which I think probably there's a help there for Spanish speakers. There's a lot of Spanish speakers in the US, isn't there?
Yeah. Okay, that's quite interesting, because I think sometimes when you're learning a language, I think some people tend to be just really good at it, and some are like a bit. I'm not all that great at learning a new language, and I am learning a language right now, and I'm not really like the best in the class at the moment. So
I know that one. No, I was never very good at learning languages either. I'm sure you'll be fine. But I think the listening program is always a help in any language. Yeah.
And also I've seen on your website that you help people with autism spectrum disorder too.
Yes. Well, a lot of the things that I've talked about, auditory processing is often a big part of autism, and a lot of people who are autistic actually also have an auditory processing disorder. They'll often have trouble with hearing in background noise. They might also have a sensory issue with loud noises. And this is where these programs can really help in these areas as well.
That all sounds really good. It sounds like, I mean, it's just a pity that people aren't going to be diagnosed properly, because there is help out there. And
That's right. But like I said earlier, there are no cures, and these programs don't cure anything. They do improve lives, and
which is important.
It is important. That's right. And there are other programs out there as well. I just don't provide those. I'm not trained in them, so I can't provide them. But there are a lot of other programs out there that are often recommended by professionals. So there is a lot out there, and there is a lot of help available if you look for it and find it.
Yeah. And you don't do any assessments yourself, do you, Mary?
I don't. No, I don't do any assessments. I'm not qualified to do any assessments, and it's not really necessary, because the vast majority of parents who come to me, their children have already got a diagnosis, or they've got a very good idea of what the problems are. The same with adults who come to me, they've usually already, got a diagnosis, or feel that they have auditory processing difficulties and literacy difficulties. So my philosophy is that to do as little testing as possible anyway, and just get on with putting in place therapies that are going to help, and just get on with it as soon as we can. The longer you leave it, particularly with children, then the more their difficulties are going to get ingrained, the more it's going to get difficult for them in school, particularly as you move up through the primary school years. Everything gets more and more verbal, and then the difficulties will just get worse and worse for them. So the sooner we can get in with the help, the better.
Yeah. And where can people find more information?
Well, they could go to my website for more information, and then if they don't find what they want on there, they can contact me, and just have a general look on the internet. There's a lot of other organisations out there that can help, and just see what you can find. But I generally work directly with parents. I do sometimes work with schools where the parents want their child to be doing the programme in school. It's usually just one child. I don't work with schools as such. The programmes that I provide are very good because the school doesn't need to know what's going on, although it can help if the school does realise. The children are doing it at home, so their peers don't need to know that they're doing extra work at home.
Yeah.
That can be a big thing, you see, for some children. They don't want to be taken out of class to do work separately.
Yeah.
And this can just be done in the comfort and safety of home, and which is often a lot easier.
Yeah. And your website is smartprocessing.co.uk.
That's right, yes, it is.
Yeah. Okay, thank you, Mary.
That's a pleasure, thank you.
Yeah, it was very interesting, like such a contrast from talking about gardening and mental health last time.
I know it is. Yeah. But there is a link between the two.
Yeah.
Particularly from the mental health point of view.
Yeah.
There's definitely a link.
Yeah. Okay, thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me back.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Wellbeing in the Kingdom. If you've enjoyed, learned from, or been inspired or empowered by today's episode, then please help to support the show by leaving a 5-star review wherever you get your podcasts.